Have you ever wondered why owning your intellectual property is so powerful? Well, today we're going to be talking about that. My name is Zara Watson Young. I'm the co-founder of Watson Young Law, and I'm here with our co-founder, Sean Young, and we represent female founders and we help them protect their intellectual property, specifically their trademarks and copyrights.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to getting into these topics today and really helping our female founders not only explain the importance of why intellectual property is so important for the business, but how they can leverage it and use it to help expand and scale their business. So excited to be here.
So let's jump right in. So your intellectual property is everything. We are living in the digital age. There are so many content creators, businesses all around the world. They are creating programs. They want to put their businesses on the internet. And because of that, the internet has become the wild, wild west. And many times business owners, they don't know if anyone else may be using their business name or a logo or a slogan. So we really want to talk about why owning your intellectual property is so powerful.
Yeah, in order to protect what you've built, trademark law is essential for really making sure that you secure your brand and really making sure that you have the necessary legal framework and structure around your business to ensure that what you're building is, in fact, your own. We often liken it to the deed to a house. You can move into a home, but unless your name is on the deed, you don't necessarily own that home. And it's very similar with trademarking. Unless you have the trademark to your business, you do not own your business. And intellectual property is so important. I love what you said about the digital age. We have so many content creators, so many businesses are moving online and scaling and growing. And so trademarking now more than ever has become essential for protecting your business and brand.
Absolutely. And I also want to talk about the mindset. So we work with a lot of small business owners, and many times they're coming to us after having started a passion project or a side hustle. And in their minds, they say, you know what, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait a little bit longer before I trademark. Or they say, just right now isn't the time. I need to, make more money. I need to gather more funds. And you really have to think about the future you, right? What kind of CEO do you envision yourself becoming ultimately? Right? That CEO is going to have a very different mindset. They are going to say, you know what? I worked so hard to build this brand. I really believe in it and I really want to make sure it's protected and that I own it. So having that, a very good mindset is key.
Yeah, it's critical. I used to appear in front of a judge all the time, and he always says, do not put the cart before the horse. And it's so important and very apropos here because you do not want to start a business and not have the comprehensive trademark legal strategy in place to make sure that as you're growing and scaling your business, you actually own your business. Imagine investing time, sweat, energy, tears. A lot of our entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial journey is not easy. Imagine going through that and then come to find out you get hit with a cease and desist, which essentially is a letter from an opposing brand that's basically saying, stop what you're doing immediately. You do not have rights to the trademark here. And now you're forced with some really tough options because you had that hustle mindset, like you said, and not a CEO mindset. And now you're essentially putting your entire operation at risk because you do not have a trademark in place.
Absolutely. And just going back to, I guess we can start talking about an example of a client who waited. We have a client. She is a founder of Honest Art. We have her consent to talk about this. And essentially she had been using her business name and logo for over 10 years and said, you know what, I think now I'm ready to start the trademark process. And unfortunately, when we started the process, we discovered that someone else had already started the trademark application process. It was not registered, so they had a pending application. And we had to decide, are we going to completely pivot? Because again, she had been using it for 10 years. Right. And are we going to rebrand? What are we going to do? So we decided that we're going to reach out to the other business owner and see if they'll basically coexist. So we then entered into basically a year-long negotiation and, lots of back and forth, the potential of going into litigation over this. And they finally agreed to coexist with our client. But as you can imagine, it was very stressful, right? She had built this business over 10 years. She had programs, with this name. She had built a loyal audience, customer trust. And that potential confusion in the marketplace would have been huge for her. And just having to potentially rebrand would have been, enormous. So luckily we were able to negotiate a coexistence agreement with the brand, and she didn't have to rebrand or, enter into any litigation. So we were able to allow her to continue using the mark.
Yeah, so that Jody King, when she filed for Honest Art, you're talking about, again, 10 years of using that trademark. And then we find out literally 2 to 3 months prior to her coming to us to file, someone else had filed. And we had tried to reach out to the opposing counsel and really try and settle the case. However, we got a lot of pushback, and their mark registered at the USPTO, and we were left with pending status. So essentially what that means is the USPTO is first come, first serve. So that's why you want to race to go get your mark registered. And then if there's another mark pending before yours that they believe is confusingly similar, they will stop your application until they review that application, and essentially your mark is suspended. So our client was in limbo as we were trying to negotiate this, and then their mark registered. And what did we do? We filed an opposition proceeding. We basically said, hey, we're opposing your mark. And here's why. Because our client, even though you went and registered that mark, our client was first to use the mark in the marketplace. She'd been using this for over 10 years. And then the back and forth, the legal drama. I remember you getting on phone calls. I'm getting on phone calls. And this was our client's livelihood. She had scaled from 6 figures now to 7 figures, doing conferences all across the country. And this was really important to her because that mark had become almost a signature mark and an industry standard that everyone was using. So it was important for her to have ownership over that mark. And then we were entered into that coexistence agreement finally, where both parties came to a contractual arrangement to use the mark and coexist in a way that respected each other's rights to the mark. So they were going to use it for a different purpose, and we were going to use it for our purpose, originally intended purpose, and also limited the way they can use the mark. And so coexistence agreements are very important because they provide a different solution where both parties can come to the table and work out an arrangement and agree to certain key factors and operate in the marketplace and avoid that consumer confusion, but still be able to use the mark in the way they originally intended and invested. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the key things that Jody had mentioned is, I wish I had done this sooner.
Right.
I wish I had started the process much sooner because we would have avoided all of this. So that's one key thing that I think a lot of business owners need to remember. The sooner you start, the better, because you avoid having to potentially rebrand, having to potentially coexist, because not every business owner may want to coexist and be in the marketplace with another similar brand. And then cease and desist, right? You will typically avoid having to deal with cease and desist issues in terms of you being on the receiving end of them. So trademarking early is very, very important.
Yeah, make no mistake, this other company did not want to coexist, but because we had certain facts in place, our client had been using the mark, we had evidence, we went back 10 years, and there was a whole discovery phase where we basically had to pull documents to make sure that we had our facts in a row, and we submitted that evidence to the other side and say, hey, look, this is our case, and if we go any further, it's not going to look good for you. And so we were able to exert a certain amount of leverage, and leverage is key in those factors, but not everyone has that luxury. And so that's why it's critical, like you said, to make sure that you go ahead and you trademark sooner rather than later. In fact, trademark before you begin to market.
Yes.
And I think that's a good segue,
Yes.
how marketing plays a big role in trademarks.
Oh my gosh. So don't get me wrong. I love all things branding, all things marketing, having your beautiful website, having your beautiful logos in place, working with photographers, videographers, but you want to do that after you've made sure that the name that you're going to be building your business on is available for registration. We can both speak so passionately about this because we've just been on the other side where businesses have lost their names and, have had really tough decisions to make because they didn't start the process early. So, we're going to sound like a broken record.
Right.
Starting the process early is just so, so, so important. And then I want to talk more about the power of trademarking. We work with so many incredible brands, and just to see them grow and flourish and, go into licensing, franchising, going into actual stores, it's so remarkable. And the power comes in having that peace of mind, the peace of mind, knowing that you own what you're building. You don't have to rebrand. You don't have to, really worry about receiving a cease and desist. Yes, anyone can start a lawsuit. However, you are going to have that leverage. You're going to have that registration number saying, if anyone comes after you, you can say, hey, this is my registration. I've been using it for, XYZ years. I've been using it first. You will have that leverage and that power. And then also, if you see someone else copying your brand, you have the rights to go after them and stop them. We have a client currently who she started a program. I'm not going to say names, but for this particular client, but she started a program, and one of her students started copying her content, using similar slogans to her. And
that happens more often.
Yes,
than you think. Yeah.
A lot of copycats, unfortunately, within programs.
Right.
Yeah. So we were able to file an application right away, and she's not registered yet, but we do have a pending application, and she was the person using it first. So we had that leverage already to be able to say to this individual, you have to stop. You have to take the things down. We removed access to the course. So, there's just so much leverage in that.
Right. And sometimes we don't have the leverage. I think about our client, Kosher King, who invested $300,000 into a grocery store. The unique selling proposition that they had was they, as the name implied, sell kosher food, and they had 2 rabbis certifying their store. And so for their community, the Jewish community, it's very important. They have dietary restrictions. So this was essentially, they were going above and beyond. So they had invested, all this cost money, over $350,000 invested. They opened up on a Sunday. The mayor came, did the cutting ribbon ceremony. And on Tuesday, they received a cease and desist. They received a cease and desist from another Kosher King who was registered years prior, and they had made this investment, and they contacted us, and the only thing we can do is help them rebrand and negotiate, keep them out of federal district court, work out an agreement where we could essentially give them 10 to 12 months to rebrand, because remember, they had bought all this labeling, all this marketing. And so for them, they wanted to build their consumer base first and foremost. That 12-month time was important. They can recoup some of their investment, and then they transitioned to a different name. But again, they opened up on a Sunday and received a cease and desist on a Tuesday. And so because they were marketing online, and there's something called search engine optimization, SEO, they were taking traffic from this other Kosher King in Florida. And so that's how they were discovered. And their lawyers reached out, and then they reached out to me, and we were able to negotiate something. It wasn't just stop immediately. It said, hey, hold on. Here's where my client's coming from, and this is what our strategy is. Of course, we're not revealing all of our hand, but we were able to essentially help them transition. But because they didn't come to us initially and do that clearance search, we weren't able to get the name, but we were able to successfully help them transition. So, not everybody is thinking about these issues beforehand. It can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it just makes me think of how trademarking protects your wealth. Owning your intellectual property is truly where your wealth comes from, right? Like it is an asset. And a lot of business owners are starting businesses to create wealth, to build wealth, to create generational wealth.
Right.
And it doesn't, to me, right, because I'm a trademark attorney, it doesn't make sense. Like, why wouldn't you protect what is bringing your wealth?
Right.
Right. So I think it's just so important to think about it also from that perspective. We touched upon mindset in the beginning. So having that mindset, wow, like this is an asset. This is, my livelihood. This is what I am using to create wealth, and I want to make sure that I protect it.
Reminds me of that biblical verse we always quote, a good name is worth more than riches. And then I add, a good name will bring you riches,
Yes.
right? So making sure that you have a good name in the marketplace that you can own, that you can license and leverage, and also pass down to your family, right? Trademarks also passes down through an estate. So after you pass, you can pass down to your investors or your children. If you're a lot of our clients have family-owned businesses. A lot of the most successful businesses and brands in America are family-owned businesses. You think about the Crafts, you think about the Waltons. Our President Trump right now, Trump's, right? They're a family-owned and operated business. So a lot of the successful companies in America are businesses, and they use that name, that brand name, and pass it down through generations. So that's why trademarks it hits so many different touch points and is so important, especially for legacy building.
Absolutely. So if you are ready to protect what you're building and are ready to work with, a team that really cares and will treat your brand like their own, please contact us at watsonyoung.com.